While everyone gets seated, we are going to go ahead and get started, and I get the pleasure of introducing these two to you today. So, huge room, welcome and good morning. Hopefully you've been having so much fun at JNUC since you've been here. I got the pleasure of meeting these two about 3 years ago. They are a wonderful partner of Jamf. I don't know if you're familiar with Mann Consulting, but I remember first day on the job, it was like I got to meet Isaac. And I was really nervous because I'd never worked with MSPs before, and I knew they were the smartest people in the room, which really intimidates me because I'm here to run the program, not here to read white papers. And the first thing Isaac says to me, I say, "What do you like to do in your spare time?" And he said, "I read white papers for fun." And I knew then that maybe we wouldn't have a blossoming friendship. But that wasn't true. Really, really excellent guys. And Pat's amazing too. So you have Isaac Ordonez from Mann Consulting and Pat Weber here to talk to you about flawless MDM communication. So it's a full house. Listen up, and you will be encouraged to ask questions at the end. Without further ado, come up here, boys, and I will pass the hat to you.
There we go. Thank you. This thing on? All right. Thank you, Kristen. So as Kristen mentioned, I'm Pat Weber. This is Isaac Ordonez. We're from Mann Consulting. Let's see if this button works. There we go. I actually changed our names up a little bit. For Nashville, I'm actually Garth Brooks, and this is Jimmy Buffett. So at the end of this presentation, we'll share a link out to our JNUC 2024 website. It will include all of our scripts, extension attributes, and workflows. There's a lot of information in this presentation, so do not stress. Try to keep up, take notes.
I love popcorn, so just kick back and eat some popcorn.
So what and who is Mann? We're an MSP based in San Francisco that manages a lot of unique Jamf instances with a bunch of custom tools to centrally monitor and manage each one of them. Our clients consist of startups, healthcare, venture capital, government, EDU, Fortune 500, some of them with their own custom tools and specific requirements. We'll cover a lot of our custom tools today, but one I want to call out right here is our computer report card. This not only gives us a singular view of a Jamf instance, but allows us to quickly see all historical and current compliance states for our fleet of Macs. This includes key features like OS updates, patching, and of course, enrollment states. So to kick things off, we have to understand why we ended up here. So flawless MDM communication is our topic. So we started looking at security controls, more specifically CIS Control 1.8. which is to ensure the device is managed by MDM. Note that this above control right here only checks if there's an MDM profile installed. So after working with this data across our customers, this made us stop and think. This CIS control only checks that a computer has been enrolled. However, it doesn't answer some key questions. For example, is this computer enrolled in my MDM? Has this MDM profile expired? Is it still communicating properly with the MDM? What if it's communicating, but the communications aren't healthy?
And what about, we're all using Jamf, so what about the check-in process? That's not included here either.
Yeah, Jamf uses binary for policies, right?
Yeah, it does.
So the overall impact of these questions can lead to the following issues. Configuration profiles not installing, inventory is incorrect, some or all policies are not running, security software is not properly installing, and security benchmarks are reporting incorrectly, all of which can be very bad for an organization trying to meet any compliance framework. Or even more basic, just have a healthy MDM, truly managing computers. So we'll quickly go over the basics on how computers communicate. We have the Jamf binary, the Jamf daemon, and APNS. Apple MDM or APNS is Apple's standard protocol for using their push notification service. The server tells Apple it wants to talk to the device. Apple tells the device to check in, and then the server gives it a command. This is responsible for wipe, lock, VPP installation, and configuration profiles. The Jamf check-in process is a launch daemon that typically runs on an interval, usually 15 minutes. The computer checks in with Jamf for new instructions. This is responsible for policies, installing packages, and running scripts.
I like 5 minutes for that.
Set it? Yeah, set it. Let's go. The Jamf daemon handles restricted software tile and application usage. But also a fun fact, any policy where you have the network state change ticked will run when the system is asleep in PowerNap. This can be useful for gathering inventory from inactive computers. And lastly, the recon process, which is part of a policy and submits the information about the computer back to your Jamf server.
So first off, let's talk APNS and how we found some issues with it. One small fact, MDM profiles are renewed for up to the validity of the Jamf Pro CA. So if your Jamf Pro CA, which button is it?
The green one.
Oh, colorblind, sorry. If the Jamf Pro CA has a validity of 1 year, your clients are going to renew their client profiles for 1 year. So that gives you a shorter lifespan for those profiles. So we recommend renewing your Jamf Pro CA at the 2-year mark, so your client certificates all get a 2-year. So some symptoms of failed APNS communications, these are pretty hard to detect when you're in the Jamf Pro console. There's no smart group that you can just create to say, who isn't communicating through APNS? You have to go in to the history and look at pending commands and look at completed commands on a per computer basis. So as you can see here, we have a computer that the check-in was in August, while the last successful APNS command was in January. So I know the computer's talking to Jamf, but it's not receiving configuration profile updates. There we go. So the causes for these failures can vary greatly. Some of them will impact your fleet if you are trying to renew Wi-Fi certificates. Others you may not notice for a very long time because most of your configuration profiles are installed. But one of the causes that's pretty common that we see, if anybody's renewed an APNS certificate and saw this notification and had somebody ignore it, they used the wrong certificate to renew, and the Jamf server will stop communicating with all the computers that had the old certificate. So it's not fun to recover from. We did find that you can renew for years later recently, so it's helpful.
That's a little fun tidbit.
It was fun. So outside of manually checking each inventory record, how do we check for APNS failures? So luckily we have the Jamf recon process, which gives us extension attributes. We made an extension attribute that checks the date of the last successful acknowledgement command from the Jamf server. So client gets a configuration profile or command. It installs it. It tells Jamf, hey, I installed it. Jamf says, I acknowledge that. So we grab that time, and we consider that the last successful command. So we also know sometimes when something's wrong, like if the MDM profile is missing. That's just bad. So we created time-based error codes. So if the last communication date was in 2000 on January 1st, and the seconds are at 2, there's no MDM profile. Or if it's at 3 seconds, the client identity certificate is missing, or it's expired in the keychain. And lastly, there's a 4-second one for the client identity certificate expired as well. So now that we have this date-based data, we can now build a smart group for computers in our system that are checking in with Jamf, but are not communicating through APNS. Unfortunately, the fix for this is manual. So we couldn't go any further than that, so there's a re-enroll process. And if the computers are enrolled through pre-stage and profiles are set as non-removable, wipe or go into recovery mode and actually manually remove that certificate. Basically, a quick recap on APNS failure. So we have an extension attribute that you will all get at the end of this that gives us a date of the last successful communication. We then have a smart group that we can use to identify computers that are checking in but are not receiving profiles. And we have can then send that to IT to remediate, either re-enroll, swap out the laptop, anything like that before it becomes necessary, like you're deploying a new security agent and it doesn't load. Quick announcement, one thing that we did find here, MDM profiles can be set as non-removable during pre-stage, so you think that the user can't tamper with them. They can. If they edit the system keychain and remove the Jamf client certificate, you will no longer be able to wipe that machine, send new profiles to it. You've lost communication. So that part of the keychain is not SIP protected like the profile. So something to keep in mind. We found a customer that their IT department was doing that for the computers to try and renew Wi-Fi certs. So
that was fun. Let's talk the Jamf check-in now.
oh,
Back to you, actually.
So like APNS failure, a failed check-in on an active computer does require manual inspection. So totally the opposite of what we talked about last time, which was we had a computer that had check-in but wasn't receiving commands. This scenario, we have the actual opposite. This computer hasn't checked in since February of 2023, but it received a config profile, right? It's online, but there's something wrong with the Jamf binary. Some common causes of this failure. Employee tampering of the launch daemon, right? Not SIP protected, the profile is, people may remove it. It could just break for unknown reasons. Somebody may delete the system keychain, and there could be a hung policy. And we'll get into hung policies a little more later, but detection for this is actually really easy if we leverage Apple's MDM communication channel to identify who is active. So first, in this scenario, we create a smart group of computers that haven't communicated with Jamf in over 14 days, and scope a configuration profile to this group of so-called inactive computers. And we just give it a null payload with a custom configuration. And then, as you can see, we scoped it. Now we're going to create another smart group, which is show me the computers that have that profile installed and have not checked in recently. And the interesting thing we found was, while recon is responsible for most inventory actions, the is profile installed or not is not part of the recon process. It's actually part of that acknowledgement from the client to the server saying, I received this profile and I installed it. So the inventory will actually update for that computer, and you'll get a group of computers that are not checking in, but do have a profile that you scoped them. Remediation, luckily, somewhat easy. If you like using the API, you can redeploy the Jamf management framework over APNS, so we're using the working channel to push the Jamf package and the framework to the device, and try reinstalling it. Fair warning, it will trigger a re-enrollment state, or will cause the re-enrollment trigger to trigger. And if you have any onboarding scripts, they'll kick off. So recap of this. We also wrote a script that automates that process, and we'll provide it as well. Create a group, computers that are not checking in. Create a configuration profile with some null data. Create a group of computers that have that configuration profile, and then utilize the API to try and re-enroll those machines and bring them back into state.
All right, now I think this is me.
Yeah.
Thank you for keeping up with us. So another pro tip here, as mentioned, checking the box for the network state change at check-in, or I'm sorry, the network state change, checking that box right there will run outside of the check-in process and in PowerNap. So adding this trigger to your inventory update will gather inventory data if the computer's not a user and sleep. Think vacation, maternity, paternity leave, computers in a desk somewhere.
Users on a submarine?
Users on a submarine. Oh.
Next up is incomplete or partial check-in.
We practiced this
Totally.
back and forth.
And then we changed the notes right before we started. So a couple things to note about the Jamf check-in process. I mean, also ChatGPT does a great job at giving me images. The Jamf check-in process, the policies run in alphabetical order. A to Z, or well, probably 0 to Z.
0 to Z.
There is no time to live set for policies. So if you have a policy that takes 4.5 years to run, that check-in process will take 4.5 years plus whatever other policies need to run. So another thing to note, if you have a policy named asset tag prompt at the front, and it prompts and waits for data, and you have a policy called zoom update, zoom update's not running until asset tag prompt is done. So we have a definition internally that I guess we're kind of giving here is the last check-in object in the Jamf inventory is the last time the computer started a check-in with Jamf. We created something which was last full check-in, which is the last time it finished a check-in, which is important to us because I want to know if zoom ran. I don't want to know if asset tag name started. That's important to me. So it's actually the simplest EA in the world. Quickly, some of the symptoms of a partial check-in. You may see that the check-in's recent, but not all apps are up to date. Some apps are. You look in the history log and you'll see like ran asset tag change, Google Chrome update, and then there'll be like a day gap. And then it'll be, well, I ran remote desktop and then a day gap, and you're just missing stuff. It just doesn't feel right. One cause of a partial check-in can be a blocking installer process. So Mac OS, like the check-in process, has some limitations. It only runs one installer at a time with the installer binary. So if an installer takes 1.5 years to install, every other installer sits behind it very patiently. CrowdStrike just keeps respawning, so you get about 1,000 installer processes waiting in line. Various vendors will handle it differently. We found this with post-install and pre-install scripts that never actually finish or try and wait for user input. So Netscope, in certain modes, will pop up a window that says, you have to approve the system extension during the installation process. And if the user goes, I'm busy, no more installers for you. So software updates don't work, and policies don't work, unfortunately. This could be malicious. I've created them to break things. Another cause for a partial check-in is a hung process. Some people think I don't use processes that hang, but here's a list of built-in processes that we have found will just not respond and not exit in some cases. It's infrequent. It's like 1 out of every 400,000 runs, but eventually that becomes a big issue. So the last one, and this is very, very common, is dialogues to your users. Most people don't think to put the timeout command in a dialogue. So if you are asking the user or employee to do anything, you need an exit strategy. So Jamf helper, Swift dialog, OSA script, I always mess that one up. Make sure that there's a timer so that if the user decides that, hey, I'm busy, I'm presenting in a meeting, I'm going to take that window and I'm going to throw it in the top right corner and hide it, that it doesn't sit there for 9 days and you don't have a check-in for 9 days. So how do we get the last full check-in date and detect incomplete policies? It's actually kind of easy. It's pretty rudimentary, actually, for us. We created a policy with a bunch of Z's at the beginning, and it writes the current date and time to a file. We have an extension attribute that grabs that date and time and reports that into the database. So I know when my policy, like stack, finished. And then we can create smart groups to say, I want to know who is checking in, but who is not finishing. And then I can go try and look at my scripts, my policies, the computers, to maybe see if there's something wrong there. In addition, last year at JNUC during Partner Day, we released the Communications Doctor. This is a launch daemon that we have running on every system. It monitors the Jamf check-in process and assigns a TTL to policies of 8 hours. So if a single policy runs for more than 8 hours, it gets forcefully killed. And if an extension attribute is collecting data for more than 60 minutes, we kill it. So, recap, create a policy that records the last full check-in. Oops, back. We create an extension attribute that gathers that data, puts it into the inventory so we can get a smart group, and then IT reviews their workflows to make sure everything is doing what it's doing, or they check the communications doctor for any errors saying, hey, I killed this process because it was going for way too long. All right, home stretch. Is everybody okay? Did we? All right. One last thing to note. The last inventory update, when we're using that as a metric for the last time I got recon, it's not the last time the server heard from the client. It's the last time the inventory was changed. So if you edit the user and location history, if you use API, if you use another tool that maybe puts data into that Jamf record from like Power BI or something, that's also an inventory update. So it's not a metric of communication. It's a metric of inventory change.
There we go. So what are some symptoms here? Some inventory data may be out of date. As you can see from this screenshot of the computer, it has a check-in from August 1st and an inventory update from July 21st, and a full inventory update from July 15th. So our compliance data is over 2 weeks old. There's been Jamf product issues that resulted in showing blank inventory updates, even though the inventory update was successful, so just something to keep in mind there. But how do we detect? So our extension attribute that writes the current date and time in the inventory is one of them. And then we use that to compare to the last inventory against the last full inventory to find inconsistencies here. So this is just the smart group that we created on that. So how do we fix this? We first try running recon in verbose mode locally to see if there's any errors. You can also re-enroll the device. Side note, if you continue to have issues on this, reach out to Jamf support. But just quick recap, so the EA writes the current date, the smart group validates it, and then IT reviews failures on it.
Before we go on to the next slide, the PIs that we're talking about, one was very old. It was the software update database table only accepted like 32 characters, and Apple released an update that was like this long. And so every time the recon happened, it was just blank data. So you'll see stuff like missing data completely in the record, or just not updated. And so we're really trying to look for, did we write that data to the database versus did recon occur? And before we get to Q&A, there's another instance that we found recently that we didn't get in the slides here, which is the employee even using that machine? So, why isn't your software updated? Apple software updates aren't running. The employee's been on paternity leave for a month and the computer's sitting on their desk, right? You have to click OK to accept that update. So we did include one more EA that is not here that checks and reports how many days the screen has been locked for consecutively. So you can try and take that data and say, okay, well, they didn't update, VMware Horizon or Apple software update. They also haven't been there for 60 days. Maybe that's a metric I need to take in, and maybe we need to recover that laptop or tell them to turn it off. So.
Last but not least, QR at the top is just going to bring you right to that website. So if your camera can't reach that QR, manually enter mann.com/JNUC24. I believe it's actually JNUC 2024.
Ooh.
So that might be it. Anyone who scans that QR code, validate for me that it is JNUC 2024.
2024.
There we go.
Sorry.
2024.
On there is a little bit about us. If you don't want to hear about us, go straight to the bottom, and there's a GitHub repo link. We've modified these a little bit. There are installers included for these to easily get them into your Jamf instance. They are basic SH scripts that will upload the XML files to your Jamf instance to the API after asking you for name and password, and make it easy for you to implement. If you do find issues, let us know. These were kind of taken out of our main repo and cleaned up a little bit. So
You'll see our workflows in there as well, and then all of our public documentation on our workflows is mann.com/docs, D-O-C-S. Shout out to our team, by the way. We have 3 guys from our team here. Luis, Eric, and Kane is somewhere in the back over there. Q&A.
Thank you so much. I said
you.
before, you know, I get nervous with the smartest people in the room, and it's full of them here. So I'm going to do my best to take this around, and anyone who has questions, I'll come to you. Okay?
We got one over here.
Where are we at up here? Okay. Hi.
So can you talk about how big of an environment you're working with? Because increasing your inventory updates to every network change can be a pretty significant
I'm sorry?
The network change on the inventory update, how big of an environment are you working with? Because that could be a load on the server, considering people moving around in the office to different SSIDs or switching their computers off and on.
Yep. So anywhere from 20 to 7,000. Jamf hasn't yelled at me yet.
Well, we have, but not for that.
Remove the feature then?
Just kidding.
If you don't want me to use it.
No one removed the feature.
And
There's
the same
anyone
goes
who-
with the check-in process, that interval of 15. Isaac threw out 5. Put a load on it. And you know, if your environment can handle it, if Jamf's not yelling at you, make it 5.
Wait till they hear about my nested smart groups.
The more data, the better, right? The more data you have, the more you can ingest, the more you can create smart groups and try to funnel in what's actually occurring in your environment, what's broken, what do I need to tell someone to go talk to this person about or physically touch that machine. You know, our goal is to not have to do that. So if we can isolate that down to, you know, small numbers for our clients that are across the globe, it makes it that much easier for us to talk to someone who doesn't have an IT presence on site.
Who else has questions?
Do you have any tips on how to troubleshoot iOS devices failing to communicate?
No.
Is it connected to Wi-Fi?
Device trust seems to be the best. With that, using Okta or whatever product you're going to use for trusting that device so that it cannot access resources if it's not enrolled. But Apple really limits what you can and cannot do there, unfortunately.
Who else has a question?
Hi guys, ton of great information. One point that you were very clear on, but it sounded so amazing to me, I just have to make sure I heard you right. You got a Mac that's not checking in, not doing inventory updates. You can push a null config profile to it, do a smart group based on that, and it will be updated in the inventory record even though it's not checking in or doing inventory updates.
Yes.
Amazing. That's going to be really helpful.
It was, it was like the find of my summer. We
You had a
so
really
many-
boring summer.
You know I didn't actually, of all people.
I do know he has a very exciting life.
Does any of this work with Jamf School?
We have built everything for Jamf Pro to the point where I can't even, yeah, I don't know. Does it have extension attributes?
Email us.
Yeah.
All right. What other questions we have out here? Anyone? Oh. You with the great hair.
I saw your hand, don't worry.
For the benefits of actually presenting this to my higher ups, is there a chance of getting a copy of these slides so that I can actually do so?
Yes, I will post them onto the GitHub repo, and if I don't do it by the party, come find me and make me do it there.
I like that.
That'll require buying me a drink.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you beat me to that caveat.
Just one?
No,
No, they all have to.
Yeah. How many people do we have? 250? All right, 250 beers.
Anyone else
Kristen,
have
there was a question right here.
Oh, okay.
Quick question, the computer report card, is that like an internal tool or do your clients see that? And how is it generated?
It's for our clients. We designed it as a way to get like key data out of Jamf without having all these like smart groups. And it also allowed us to filter that in a human readable format for our customers. And it also allowed us to aggregate a lot of things and look for like trends, like CrowdStrike is not checking in, or APNS is failing, or SIP is suddenly removed from all these computers. So we give that to our clients, and it is historical, so you can go back in a point in time and say, on this day, SIP was enabled on all computers, and only 3 computers were out of OS compliance, which is nice to have.
It's really good for our, I wouldn't say like less technical points of contact with our clients. It's really good for the IT director who knows what he needs to look for or she needs to look for, but not necessarily do the work. So from the point in time perspective, it's checking in all the time. This report card is updating every day, and I can go in and say, oh, Chrome had a 0 day, and we need to enforce it. Out of that enforcement, I'm going to look at it today. I'm going to see how many times it's run, go back in Jamf look, and then validate that with the computer report card as well. It's also good for any compliance. You give it to an auditor and you say, here you go. Here's all the boxes that need to be checked. If we need to check more, we start doing more work to get that validation in there.
If you guys want to go way off topic, come find us afterwards.
Yeah.
I don't want to make this a sales
Yeah.
pitch for everybody.
Who else has any questions?
This is a major issue with what we're having right now. Right now, I got like about 460 devices that have not checked in within 30 days.
Yep.
So is this a lead on to what I could be using to get this done?
You can use the workflow for check-in to see if those devices are actually out in the wild and still communicating, and you could add these on. Yeah, is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we will give you a SH script that will upload that workflow and configuration profile to your instance and deploy it. And a script that you can run against the API to automatically iterate through that group and try and redeploy the framework. Hopefully it helps. If it doesn't, come find me.
A lot of people are going to come find you today.
Yeah, find him.
Hello. Question about monitoring the MDM profile expiration on computers. So if you know that, hey, we should be renewing within 30 days, but it's 5 days away, we still haven't renewed. Any tips, or are we just still looking at re-enrollment?
So if the EA doesn't update with the current date, because the extension attribute literally is just running the date command in a result bracket. The recon verbose command is probably going to be your friend locally on the system to figure out if there's an extension attribute that's hanging. Does that answer the question? Sorry, I heard most of it.
No, the MDM profile.
Oh, sorry. Redo the question, sorry.
So our MDM profile should automatically renew within 30 days or 60 days, something like that.
Yeah.
But it just seems like a lot of environments that I work with, there's just going to be that 1 or 2% that people aren't monkeying with the keychain, like none of that's happening, but it's not, so as a proactive measure, I've been monitoring the looming expiration date.
Yes.
Right? So, hey, if it's getting like within 1 week, are there things that I can do, or am I basically in the same boat as?
It could be the topic ID.
Well, so yeah, there are things you can do. If your expiration date is nearing, Jamf Pro should automatically be issuing commands to renew that profile. And if your certificate authority has a nice, comfortable 2-year date and you're just getting closer and closer, check to see if the device is receiving commands. That is sometimes the expiration not matching to the receiving of commands is something that we miss, and it's required, that communication is required. Another thing is grab a sysdiagnose log and look for the MDM client, filter through, and see if there's something that we need to give to Apple, because we have seen these like small percentage of computers that kind of just slide into expiration, and we can't figure out why. Even though Jamf is sending the renew command, sometimes we'll actually see them disappear. They'll communicate up until the renew command is received, and then they are just like out. And then we see that profile expiration date come close. So.
These are all great tools, thank you. We have the same 1% or so, and I imagine almost everybody does. But I want to use these tools and test against it. I have a huge test lab.
Yep.
How do you break it? I have to find those 1% and then go get them and then play with them, et cetera. I want to trigger that. I want to break.
You want to break MDM communications?
Yes.
If you're a Jamf user and you want to break MDM, open keychain access, click on the system keychain. Everybody can do it now? No? Okay. Open keychain access, system keychain. Click on certificates at the top. There will be a certificate with a UUID, and there'll be a key below it. If you export that to the desktop, that'll be a nice little backup. Delete it, and communications have ceased for that device. I wouldn't try and remote wipe my own device in that scenario, but throw a configuration profile at it, and you're gone. It's a test lab, yeah. So that's a good way to give yourself a false state.
Or lock. Send a lock command.
Send a lock, whatever.
Easy enough.
I just want to say one thing as well. So a few years ago back, we went from on-prem to cloud. And at some point during that, our MDM server URL changed. And so now we're finding those systems kind of cropping up where they just will not renew the MDM. Is re-enrollment really the only option there?
From what I've seen, we've been Jamf Cloud for so long that we haven't had that migration in a while. So from what I've seen, re-enrollment is the only way for that, yeah.
Strangely enough, we have a couple of systems that are that have that same old URL, but they were renewed since the migration.
Yeah.
So doing a re-enrollment obviously is going to re-trigger the enrollment policies.
Well, if you're trying to re-enroll the MDM command or the MDM profile, you need to go into the recovery mode, delete it because it's usually system integrity protection enabled.
Okay.
And then you need to come back into the OS and do a re-enroll, and it will trigger any policies that you have.
Do you have any tricks for how to not trigger policies? You can't do enrollment date.
If you have a single deployment script that runs, check for the presence of the Jamf log and how many entries it has. If you've got a Jamf log, you've already been enrolled, so maybe you don't need to do more things, right? And also, back to the question on certificates and non-renewal, getting up to Sonoma around like 14.6 is going to make your life way better. Apple has made major changes to the point where you can no longer kickstart the process because they consider it actually working, where it was pretty broken through Monterey, Ventura, beginning of Sonoma. So enforcing OS upgrades is always going to be one of your first key things, even though people resist that.
I was told to take the mic from him.
You can give it back. Okay. We still got 5 minutes, so.
All right. Anybody else have any questions?
Really curious on the checking APNS. You guys are checking for success. Why didn't you guys check for failure?
Because it's easier to smart group based off of success on a date-based smart. Like it was easier to roll it out across a lot. I want to know when this actually worked. Failures sometimes happen. For example, you will get an HTTP 500 from the server occasionally if it's overload, if it's busy, but that may be a transient error. So the success at least says, I made it a week ago, I failed 4 times, and then I made it again. I consider that a win. All profiles are installed. So yeah, good question though. Yeah.
Great. Any other questions looming out there for anyone unwilling to buy them a drink?
God, my liver.
So question about having devices enroll or check in. We have several devices, Macs in particular, that even after re-enrolling, they still are not communicating with Jamf. Any tips there?
When we say communicating with Jamf, are we talking about check-in or APNS?
Check-in.
Check-in. Are you doing a full uninstall of library applications Jamf folder, or doing the remove framework command beforehand?
We did not, so that's a good point.
Clear out some stuff. The Jamf keychain, I think, is still around. I couldn't find it as of this talk, but there are things that Jamf does internally that you probably want to just clear out first, especially on the check-in process, because it's pretty simple. It's not as complicated as the MDM profile.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
So glad it didn't work out this morning.
You mentioned using going through sysdiagnose for a record of what the client is doing with MDM commands. Any other tools you use in that, like a log show predicate or anything?
Sorry, can you say that last part a little louder?
Are there any other tools you use for checking MDM commands on the client side, like a log show predicate?
So the extension attribute we use is the log show predicate. The reason I asked for the system diagnose is so that I can run log show against the archive. Everything we're gathering is from the log show because that's actually what the client is seeing, reading, and I can get some pretty detailed logs in there actually about why a failure occurred. And if you're really brave, you can try and match that timestamp on the Jamf server and see why Jamf said 500 error to that response. But it's a lot of digging.
Not quite that brave yet, but I'll keep it in mind.
Huh?
Not quite that brave yet, but I'll keep it in mind. Also, in reference to the earlier question on enroll, there is a no policy switch if you do the manually type it in enroll command.
Yeah. I'm sorry? Yeah. Was that a question or a statement? Sorry. Statement. Cool. Statement.
One thing that I learned with the sysdiagnose on the developer page for Apple, there's a something on there called messages logging. I know it sounds misspelled, but it'll unredact a lot of the APNS logs, so you can do a lot better searches through the predicate.
Interesting.
So yeah, so it's that config profile is only valid for 4 days. Mm-hmm. So it's basically doing sysdiagnose verbose mode.
Yeah, like taking the private entries out.
A lot more APNS control and visibility into what APNS is doing on the back end, unredacted.
Yeah. Just hard to install an APNS profile when.
Well, yeah.
APNS.
Yeah, remote into the machine and do it manually.
Yeah.
But that's how we've found out a lot of our APNS issues, is being able to actually see the target and see exactly what the APNS is doing. Yeah. So just a thought and an idea for those of you that are having APNS issues.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you. It says 0.
does.
Okay, our time is up. If you have any more questions, you're going to have to buy them a drink. Everybody give them a round of applause, please. They did a great job.
Do we take our selfie now?
No.